Super Rugby Trans-Tasman is just around the corner. Who are the favourites? Who are the underdogs for this one? Let's go through the odds and see just how things lie. We'll also compare this to the last few times New Zealand sides met Australian sides in Super Rugby. It has been a while, but we'll see kind of how fairly or unfairly things are standing. Just a kind of disclaimer up front. All of these odds are pulled from a New Zealand bookmaker here in New Zealand. They are decimal based odds, which if I remember I will try to read out as I read out these percentages. And if you are interested in punting, then you'll realize that these numbers add up to 100, which no sane bookmaker would ever put out there. There's always an over round with the bookmaker, so the actual percentage should be 121.1%. That accounts for the kind of profit margin that the bookies are guaranteed to make. For the ease of understanding, I have rounded all the numbers down by the same percentage, so it equals a tidy 100%, so the non-punters out there can kind of understand what's going on as well. But anyway, there's just bookmakers odds. They're kind of implied odds on how these teams are going to finish, and you guys can let me know where you think they've got it right, where you think they've got it wrong, and if there's any value to be had out of any of these. Now, the obvious one, there's one team which has got 45.09% chance on here, and there's certainly, I would say, no doubts about who that is, and that is the Crusaders. The Crusaders are big-time favourites for Super Rugby Trans-Tasman on the back of their Super Rugby Aotearoa second win, on the back of winning every Super Rugby competition there has been since 2017. So, yeah, kind of no surprises. The Crusaders are the favourites. They're paying $1.83, which if you take into the over-round, the percentage would be more like 54.6. But remember, the total for that one goes to 120%. So, yes, Crusaders, big-time favourites. I'm not sure anyone would really argue with that. They did get beaten a couple of times in Super Rugby Aotearoa, so you could say maybe they're a touch vulnerable, but they still finished pretty comfortable winners. The next favourite, well, I'm actually going to go from the bottom now. The least favourite team is the guys whose jersey I'm wearing, and that is the Waratahs. The Waratahs are paying $501 to win Super Rugby Trans-Tasman, so 0.17% chance. If they can get a win or two, I think that would probably be seen as a pretty successful campaign. Above them is the Force. The Force, despite finishing third in Super Rugby AU, are ranked below the Rebels, who are here. So you got three Aussie teams with a percent-ish chance of winning. The Force are paying $151 and the Rebels $67. So yeah, not huge favourites in terms of how they're going to perform. Now, I will do another video. I may have already released it, depending on how I release these videos, about who's got the best kind of fixtures list. That may be something to take into account as well. Next, you'll notice there's three teams here on the same percentage. They're all kind of even. So that would be the Chiefs, that would be the Highlanders, and that would be the Hurricanes. So you got three New Zealand teams, each paying $8.50 to win Super Rugby Trans-Tasman. They're all exactly the same odds, which seems a bit bizarre when you look at some of their fixtures, but as I said, we'll have to look into that one a bit more detail at a later time. But yeah, the three of them, there's a wasp just flown into my room because I left the window open. I might have to deal with that. Hold on a second. Right, what was I saying before we had a guest? Yeah, the three Kiwi teams. Interestingly, the Chiefs, who made the final, are ranked equally with the bottom placed Hurricanes and the second from bottom Highlanders. So yeah, the finalist from the Aussie competition who lost, the Brumbies, they are ranked over here at 5.53%. I should have mentioned, I did mention the odds. The Brumbies are at $15. So despite the fact they made the final, they're still ranked below these three New Zealand teams. The Blues, interestingly, are the second favourites. You may have thought that was going to be the Reds. The Reds are over here. So the Blues are paying $7 and the Reds are paying $13, so 6.36 and 11.81%. So yeah, it's one that stirred up a bit of controversy. If you've been on any kind of social media at all, you'll know there's a fair bit of talk about the Aussie teams being written off, being a bit of a insult. I don't know, man. It's an interesting one. In recent years, the Aussie teams have not had good fortunes against the New Zealand teams, and this competition is essentially the Aussie teams play 5 New Zealand teams in a row. The Kiwi teams play 5 Aussie teams in a row. There's no break. There's no buys. It's a pretty tough one. But when we look back to 2020, the last time the Aussie teams and the Kiwi teams played before the season was called off with COVID, there were 7 games played between New Zealand and Australian teams. In New Zealand, there were 4, and in Australia, there were 3. The games in New Zealand was split 50-50. New Zealand teams won 2, Australian teams won 2. So the Crusaders beat the Waratahs and the Reds in New Zealand, whereas the Brumbies beat the Chiefs and the Rebels beat the Highlanders also over here in New Zealand. So based on that, maybe this does look a bit crazy. But then if you look at the in Australia record, the New Zealand teams went 3 from 3. So the Blues beat the Waratahs, the Chiefs beat the Waratahs, and the Highlanders beat the Brumbies. So, I mean, it's interesting that the Waratahs are responsible for 1, 2, 3 of those losses. So 3 out of 7 losses are the Waratahs, who didn't have the best of times that season. But so that means New Zealand teams went 5 from 7 over the Aussie teams. But it does also show that the Aussie teams were quite capable of getting wins over here in New Zealand, which in previous years had been kind of a tough thing to come by. But 2 out of 4 is actually a pretty decent record. So yeah, average score, New Zealand team scored 30 points, Aussie team scored 21. So a 9-point differential. But that is kind of ancient history at this point. But yeah, what do you guys reckon? Do you think the Reds are kind of being hard done by based on only a 6.36% chance, or paying $13? Or do you think history suggests that New Zealand teams will have a field day up against their Aussie rivals? It's hard because we haven't seen these teams play in such a long time against each other. They've been playing in their own little bubbles. There is times when I've looked at the Aussie games and then the Kiwi ones and thought, man, the Aussies are playing the more attractive game. There are other weeks where I think it's not looking the best. But I don't know. It's going to be an interesting one to see. We don't have long to wait to find out. You guys let me know your thoughts on these. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys soon. See you later. If you guys are interested in having a wee flutter on some of the games, it's well worth having a look at Rugby Forecast site. Not only do they do the algorithm predictions, but they've also got a service which looks at like the analysis of what the bookmakers are offering in terms of their odds. So if you want to find a game which is maybe a little bit mispriced, then it's worth checking out. Link in the description for that one. They kind of walk you through everything you need to know on how it works. There's information on kind of how successful their service is at identifying those times when the bookies have got the odds maybe just a little bit wrong. They look at loads of matches like top 14, Super Rugby, Premiership, a wee bit of everything. So yeah, guys, check it out. There's plenty of information there. And if you use the code 2centsrugby in the sign up, you get a 20% discount off, and you get the first month free regardless. So yeah, guys, check it out. And yeah, talk to you again soon. See you later.